everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief, our weekly show about politics. I'm Marcus Molitzis. I'm here with Carrie Eleveld. How are you doing, Carrie?
Good. Just fine.
Carrie, we haven't talked, I think, all week. So I don't know if you've heard this big groundbreaking news of the last week. So
do tell. What did I miss?
Joe Biden is old. So told you. Relax. It's okay.
Whoa, wait a second. I thought
Joe Biden.
I thought he was like in his, his 40s or so. I was convinced that he was young.
Carrie, for some reason, it's not even a reason, it's because of a BS special prosecutor report that had nothing to do with his age. The big news of the week really has been this whole notion that Joe Biden is old. And what New York Times had like 50 stories about it seemingly all week, but it was literally over a dozen stories on the fact that he's old. And Carrie, so you've been covering these elections the last couple of cycles. I'm just curious, how did Joe Biden get away with hiding his age in the 2020 elections? Like that was quite a little slippery he did on the media, right?
He masterful. It was masterful. Yeah. He had. Do you know that he had a body double out there who was pretending to be him, and then it turns out that it's not. He's not 60. He's not 50, and it's been a real shocker. But yeah, no. I mean, look. So the reason people are I have a lot to say about this. I'm sure you do too. The reason people are harping on this is because they know, the voters are not, they're asymmetrical essentially in their views of Trump and Biden. But really, it breaks down to more of a partisan thing, okay? Where Democrats are willing in polling to say, yes, we're concerned about people being old, Trump and Biden. Okay, we're concerned about.
Wait. Trump is equally old.
Right.
Is that the next big bombshell revelation?
Trump might be plump, but he's no spring chicken. Anyway, so someone's gonna put that on a t-shirt, and I want money for it. Okay, so anyway, but so when this is polled, right? It turns out that Democrats are clear-eyed about the fact that both of the candidates that we're almost surely going to see in November, are equally old, right? They're not young. All right. It's true. And, but the difference, a lot of the reason that Biden polls worse on this question of age is that Democrats are willing to say it, and Republicans, the cult Republican base, is not willing to say that they're worried about Trump's age. And who knows, they may not be. They're obviously not worried about the fact that he's basically batshit, right? So excuse I know this is supposed to be family friendly, but every once in a while.
No, it's not. Wait, I don't know where you got that impression.
Anyway,
careful there.
Well,
careful there.
You're careful, right? So I mean, part of the problem is that reporters are very tuned into the fact that this is something that Democratic voters are, concerned about, voters in general, but Democratic voters are willing to be concerned about it and admit that to pollsters. And Republican voters either aren't concerned about it because they're in a cult, or at least, the MAGA base is, or they aren't willing to say they're concerned about it because, you can't question, their leader. Right. So, but what's interesting? So I listened to the Bulwark, several of the Bulwark podcasts regularly. And one thing.
Wait. The Bulwark is never Trump Republicans that have sort of bucked the Republican Party because of Donald Trump.
Because
they're
of
pro-democracy, which is like the lowest bar, apparently.
Yeah, it's
pro-democracy Republicans.
Right. Pro-democracy Republicans. They're basically never Trumpers. Most of them were not, at least originally, traditional journalists, right? They were former Republican operatives and, either worked on campaigns in a communication setting or worked on advertising for Republicans, that type of thing. So anyway, but now it's, I listen to it because they focus on trying to bring this relatively narrow group of voters who would probably rather not vote for Democrats, probably would rather not vote for Joe Biden, but basically trying to point out the insanity of the Republican Party, and in some cases specifically try to get conservatives and Republicans to cast a pro-democracy vote against Trump and against extremist Republicans, right? Okay, so that being said, Sarah Longwell is the publisher of The Bulwark. She's also and we've had her on several times here. She's a friend of the pod, and she said that when this report came out from her, right? Is his name Robert Hur? I think it was Robert Hur, but I can't remember. Do you know? Do you remember? Maybe not. I don't think Marcos is listening to me. No, maybe he is. Anyway, but the report came out and she said that she got, number one, first of all, she couldn't believe how much interest she got in this. Okay. She's a messaging expert. This is actually what she specializes in, is messaging. And she was like, no voters have forgotten or didn't know or weren't aware that Joe Biden is old. No one has missed that memo. So she couldn't understand why that was even something that came up, right? But on top of that, she thought it was wild that she got so much reporter interest in this story and whether or not it was going to be a problem for Joe Biden. But when Trump went out and bashed NATO and said that he was going to let Putin do, quote unquote, whatever the hell he wants with our NATO allies, right? On a national stage at a campaign rally, no reporters called her on that. Not a single one. Why? Because they all know that the Republican base doesn't care. So they didn't do any inquiries about that, which is crazy, right? That you're saying, oh yeah, I'm just going to give Putin free reign to do whatever he wants. He's like signaling to him, but in the middle of a speech that, hey, if I get elected, and by the way, wink, wink, nod, nod, if you guys help me get elected, you're going to have free reign to do whatever you want, right? Yeah. And she gets no reporter calls on that, but she gets a ton of reporter calls on this memo that says that, Joe Biden's an elderly man, right, who's forgetful. Okay. And she gets tons of calls on that. And she was like, I don't understand. Like, I cannot understand why I'm getting all these phone calls on the one thing that everybody knows when Trump actually makes news and says something horrible, and she doesn't get any reporter calls on it. It was really interesting. So anyway, I leave the floor to you.
So functionally there's this kind of, I don't want to say movement, but there are voices inside the Democratic Party tent that claim that they're the wild-eyed realist and that Democrats really should replace Joe Biden. Ezra Klein at the New York Times is sort of, I think, the latest or the highest profile person to do that. And they sort of paint themselves as these, cold-eyed realists that understand that Joe Biden is, I guess they just found out that Joe Biden is old, and they're just rocked to the core, and apparently they haven't heard the news that Donald Trump is also old. And really it's based on vibes, right? There's nothing to suggest. We all saw Joe Biden just rake the Republicans in Congress at the State of the Union address last year, and really nothing has changed. He has his moments, but Carrie, if I was in the public eye 24/7, forget it. Forget it. People would be talking about cognitive decline. On this 30-minute podcast, I have my moments, right? So
can I just say, sometimes I have been in social situations because I do fine in social situations, but I have this one social anxiety where I sometimes forget people's names. And I have literally forgotten my wife's name in the middle of trying, and I was, like decline. In my 40s, right? Like,
right.
Try. Yeah. So anyway, I'm just saying,
when you have a flub here and there, and people act like it's a big deal, but Donald Trump is literally comparing himself to Alexei Navalny, the Russian opposition leader that was just murdered by Putin. and claiming that the legal cases against him are like being murdered, and just saying literally the craziest, most nonsensical things. And we're going to pretend that Joe Biden getting the name of a world leader wrong is somehow indicative of cognitive decline. And we're going to ignore everything that Donald Trump says. And quite frankly, not just this time. Donald Trump has had cognitive decline for years, even last time he ran. And it's always been ignored by the media. It's sort of shrugged off as, Trump being Trump. But so there's Ezra Klein argument that Democrats should replace Joe Biden in a behind the scenes, closed doors at the Democratic convention. And that supposedly is the realist take. Carrie, I can't imagine something more stupid and self-defeating and dangerous to our democracy than having a bunch of insiders pick a new person. And the reason is I don't know, twofold, threefold. Let's see. First of all, you don't give up the incumbency advantage. You never give up the incumbency advantage. It is literally, Carrie, we talked about this back in November when people were talking, or last summer when people were talking about whether Joe Biden should run. You do not give up the incumbency advantage. Donald Trump was polling at 33% in 2020, and he almost won. He came within 80,000 votes, portion, in 3 states, came within 80,000 votes of being reelected. You do not give the incumbency advantage up. Particularly, you do not give it up against a candidate that is the de facto incumbent as well as Donald Trump is. He's got universal name recognition. He's got his cult behind him. You do not give that up. Second, you go to the convention and you try to broker a new candidate. Can you imagine the shit show that would be, Carrie? The Bernie crowd, the Kamala Harris, the Gavin Newsom, everybody arguing that their guy or their woman is the better candidate, and the bad feelings that would generate to make that decision behind closed doors. And if it's not Kamala Harris, people will see racism, and maybe it would be. And if it's not a woman, people will see sexism, and maybe it would be. And are we really going to pick another white guy in Gavin Newsom? Because what does that say about the party and its ability to like these issues will come to the fore. It's one thing to have the South Carolina Black electorate pick Joe Biden, as opposed to a bunch of insiders behind closed doors. And then you're making decisions not based on electability or their ability to communicate with voters effectively or the ability to build an organization. You're basing it on a bunch of insiders. That is terrible. And third, they haven't raised the money. They haven't built the organization. You can't just plug them into an existing infrastructure because different candidates have different strengths and different strategies. So you're basically starting from scratch when you have in Joe Biden somebody who actually has had an organization now for 7 years and has been working and refining it. And we can argue about whether it's perfect, because it's not, because humans are humans and no organization is perfect. But starting 3 months before the election, I can't even fathom what a disaster that would be, including the fact that there would be so much bad blood because we all know every Democratic primary is a bit of a shit show. We all know whether it's Obama versus Hillary or whether it's Hillary versus Bernie Sanders, or if it's the last one. And Carrie, you and I, we were not Joe Biden partisans, and we said he's old. We said that in 2019 and 2020, but. So we're very aware. We're not Republicans, like you very ably noted before that. We are clear-eyed realists, but the voters chose him, and nothing suggests in the polling. I mean, we can look at Civics polling where Joe Biden's approval ratings amongst Democrats is in the 90s. It's just a reality. So this notion that somebody's clamoring for somebody else and that somehow that would be better is incredibly dangerous. And I really, really wish it would stop, because it doesn't serve anybody's interest. Joe Biden is our candidate. Donald Trump is theirs. That is the matchup, and we better start focusing on what that matchup looks like and pushing for our candidates to defeat this grave threat to our democracy than to indulge in fantasies about replacing Joe Biden that, quite frankly, are not realistic and are dangerous and would make it easier for Trump to win.
Right. Well, so exactly. Show over. The end. No, just kidding. So look, you and I come to this position from slightly different places, because I was personally kind of hopeful that President Biden would not announce his reelection. And you always argued, listen, the value of incumbency is so high that you can't give it up. Okay. Now, you're right about the value of incumbency. I still wanted. Okay. But as soon as he said, I'm running, that's that, right? We would have suffered as a party from having a really messy, like, we wouldn't have necessarily suffered if he had stepped down and said, I'm opening up the field so that there can be, a new generation of leaders, whatever he said. And then, but once he said, I'm running, then we would have suffered from having a contentious infighting, whatever, and a broadside from someone on the Democratic side, right? And this notion that somehow now is the time to come out because we're going to save the party from this disastrous election is so irresponsible. I just have to say it's predicated on the premise, very much like you suggested, that somehow there's this unicorn unity ticket that everyone's going to get behind, that somehow the Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer, amalgam of, John Fetterman. I'm trying to think, who else can we throw in there?
Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris.
Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris,
Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders.
Right, exactly.
Let's throw it all. Why not?
Exactly.
Candidate. Why
Raphael Warnock, right? That amalgam is that amalgam, the ticket that everyone's
and the youth of John Ossoff. Why not?
Yeah,
Let's throw that in too.
Will emerge, and it will be genius, right?
I changed my mind. I want that person.
Yeah, exactly. We all want that person. We all want that person. And as long as I've already jumped on the swear train, no shit, right? I mean, we all want that person. We don't have that person. And you know what? If suddenly, at the convention or something, that I didn't even read Ezra Klein's newsletter.
I just summarized it.
It's okay. But I'm just saying that, like, all of these people who are questioning it now, which is by far a year too late, think that there's going to be this, this like unicorn unity candidate that everyone's going to get excited about. And that isn't going to happen. I can't imagine a more disastrous, like, infighting scene than having, like, we don't really have this. Yeah, I can't even imagine. It would be a disaster.
And have it 3 months before the election.
No, it's crazy talk. It's crazy talk.
Months,
okay,
2 months before the election. Yeah.
Yeah,
okay,
there's going to be some disaffected. At least now we're dealing with, someone who we know what their weaknesses are. We know what their strengths are. We can build on that, but
and he's old. If he goes, then Kamala Harris is president. We're okay with that.
Here's the thing is, especially when the guy you're facing is just as old, there's totally ways to message it. Right. There's I'm old, but I'm not crazy, telling, NATO allies that we're going to abandon them when Putin comes in with tanks. Right.
By the way, Carrie, I just saw a story literally a few minutes ago where Joe Biden has urged his advisors to go with that. So they're actually.
Oh, well, there you go.
Literally, they're highlight Trump's crazy. Quotes.
Yes, exactly. So there's that, right? There's also, and I get this from Simon Rosenberg, our friend Simon Rosenberg, the hopium guy, the Democratic strategist and hopium guy, is that he said, look, one thing is that Biden has had a successful presidency. Okay. And we know we need to keep informing people about the successes, but he hasn't, he came in when the pandemic was still raging. Okay. Pandemic is largely receded now. We have, very good ways of dealing with it. Most people, there are some people feeling residual effects, and it's not that it's entirely gone, but most people are moving on with their lives in a relatively normal way. Right.
There's some vibe issues that I don't know if they will resolve. And actually next week's episode, just a minor teaser, we're probably going to get into that sort of vibes, why people don't we have one of the best economies in over 60 years. Why aren't people feeling that? But we'll set that aside for now.
Right,
But yeah,
exactly. There's
by the
vibes,
numbers,
but I
by the
think
numbers,
right, by
Biden's
the
presidency
numbers.
is incredibly successful.
Incredibly successful, and I think some people really actually don't totally know. Some people don't know about the $35 insulin for, people who are
Yeah.
on Medicare. Some people don't know about the nearly $800 billion package, infrastructure package that is putting people back to work, fixing roads and bridges and
Mhm.
and digital infrastructure, etc. So like there are things that people still don't know about, right? But he's had a largely incredibly successful run as president. And that's not in spite of the fact that he is old. It's because of the fact that he has the wisdom gained by being the age that he is. And his like the things that he has done. I mean, Trump added $8 trillion to the deficit while he was president. And you know what? The middle class and lower wage workers, they didn't have anything to show for that. I mean,
Mhm.
the middle class workers and working class folks have one of the best economies right now for them to go out and find a job in. And I realize that there's still sometimes sticker shock at the grocery store, but we all know that a big piece of that was caused by corporate greed, right? So there's a lot of things that Joe Biden has done that he did because of the wisdom of his years, his way of dealing with Putin's invasion of Ukraine, right? And rallying the world leaders together, the world order together to push against that is a function of his age and wisdom, right? So, I mean, that there are this is there we don't have to back away from this fight and try to pretend that he's not old. Everyone's going to know that he's old. He's
Yeah.
not crazy and he's not
Nobody's
anti-democratic.
nobody's changing their votes. I mean, this is sort of like the uh, fundamental foundation. There's sort of some wordsmithing on my part. But the very core of this election is that nobody's mind is going to be changed. Nobody is going to go like, I was Biden, but now I'm Trump, and vice versa. Maybe on the margins, but not in any appreciable numbers. So what you're seeing right now, um, I mean, we are seeing hints that some Nikki Haley supporters might not support Donald Trump, right? But they're not switching their votes. They already left Trump. Like, there's nobody right now who's a Trump supporter who's going to flip vice versa. Just to be very clear, it's going to be an election about turnout. They always this is the modern American electorate. We are so polarized that persuasion is not really a thing. It's really about getting our people motivated and engaged and turning out. And there's nobody on the Democratic. That's not true. There's slivers here and there. I'm not going to discount the fact that there are some young Democratic leaning voters that are upset about Gaza. I'm not going to pretend that that's not the case. But from a statistical percentage, it's not a big number. And so there's little slivers here and there like that, both against Trump and against Biden, but not in any way I think that systematically changes the dynamics of the race. We won in 2020. What has changed from 2020? Like you said, one of the good things is that people already know he's old. They already know he's old. But it's Republicans are such flailing. I mean, I still don't know what the Republican message is. And next week's episode is going to be about the Republican message to tease. But I still don't fundamentally know. So if you watch Fox News and if you watch Sinclair stations, they're all screaming about crime in the cities, right? So they're trying to make it about crime when people really aren't directly impacted. Crime statistics, they're not great. They never are, but they're not.
They've gone down. Do
they've
you
gone
know
down,
this?
right?
They've got
yeah.
In 2023, we had one of the lowest rates of violent crime in the history of the U.S. in the last 50 years.
So this is where vibes comes in. And Republicans are trying to create the vibe that we're a nation under assault from crime in the cities, from a horde of immigrants on the south border. I think that's but it's vibes, not really based on reality. They can't argue about the economy because the economy is really good. So they're going to lean on vibes, right? Remember how low gas prices were when Trump was president? No, they weren't, other than artificially low at the start of the pandemic when nobody was driving. So, but they're going to try to create sort of these vibes, but they can't really point to anything specific. And what's really struck me this last week or two is that now you have 3 Republican committee chairmen in. I had to pause and make sure there was no chairwoman, but that's not a thing in the Republican Party. They're all chairmen, and so there are 3 committees, Republican committees in the House, that are going to investigate Joe Biden's age, because again, this has been a shock to the system that he's
I'm
old. Like,
sorry, I didn't know this.
but three, but what's really amazing is that they're not really talking about impeachment so much anymore. They
Oh
got
God.
nothing there, and it turns out that their star witness has just been indicted by the FBI for lying to the FBI about supposed corruption between
Yeah.
Hunter Biden, Joe Biden,
Yeah,
and
their star
recently,
witness.
I
This
think,
so this
yeah.
is this what happened? They
So
because their star witness like went by like is now under indictment and they can't rest on that anymore. That now
mhm.
they've moved to investigating Biden's age. Is that what happened? Oh
Literally,
God.
it's this is what's happening, and
Oh
it sort of
God.
just reminds me how they really have nothing. They've got nothing. Even so, the Democrats have actually, like you said, they have a really strong record to run on. Their biggest enemy is going to be vibes. The vibe is going to be a challenge. And again, this is on the fringes, because I think you're going to have a core of Democrats that are going to come home because Donald Trump is freaking terrifying, and they turn out in big numbers whenever he's on the ballot. We've seen that. We've seen Democrats turn out in special elections with just the thought that the party of Donald Trump may win an election. And Democrats are still overperforming Joe Biden's 2020 numbers by about 5 to 6 points systematically in special elections. So we have that happening. We have Republicans that we have Donald Trump, which not only does he not care about his party, but he literally just installed Lara Trump, his daughter-in-law, with no real experience running anything. And she just proudly boasted that every single dime that they raise, which is not a lot, every single dime that they raise is going to be spent on Donald Trump. This is a committee. Yeah, it's supposed to help elect the president, but it's supposed to sort of lift all boats. It's supposed to fund the infrastructure that allows them,
Yeah.
Republicans, up and down the ballot to be able to win. And instead, they're steering their contracts to their cronies. And we
Right.
all know that it's a big grift.
I mean, it
I
just
don't see, I
yeah.
don't see what's happening over there. I don't see I see a hint of a message, but it's based on vibes. And one of the challenges that we're going to have in this election, what's left of this election year, is to sort of fight back against that vibe. So once you get past that vibes, they got nothing, Carrie. And so I think this is why they're leaning so heavily on, oh my God, Joe Biden is old, because they got nothing else. If they did, they wouldn't be talking about the thing that everybody already knows and won't change a single mind, move a single voter. That's the
Yeah.
current situation.
No, I
Let
mean,
them talk about Joe Biden's age.
let them talk about I gotta say, so to your point about the RNC is basically broke at this point. And what
Literally.
Trump
Yeah.
is doing is is installing people who theoretically are going to be able to raise some money, right? But what he really wants is whatever money is raised to be able to go to him, his super PAC, and his legal fees, right?
In his
That's
pocket.
in his pocket. Well, I think in the moment, what he needs is a lot of legal help, right?
Legal, yeah.
But so right,
Legal fees.
so he is like bankrupting the Republican Party, right? If you remember last year during the midterms, our candidates were outraising, and it wasn't the same across the board, but especially in the Senate races, but also in a lot of in the House races, our candidates were outraising, just hand over fist their candidates, right? And then the problem is that even normally the GOP committees, right? The NRCC and the NRSC,
Which are the House and the Senate committees,
the House and
respectively.
the Senate campaign committees for the Republican Party. They were, well, I mean, I think the House was doing a little bit better than the Senate was, but they were not, they did not have enough money. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. But
I was going to say, but why? Because of Kevin McCarthy, and who is no longer at the
yeah, right.
Republican.
Because Kevin McCarthy was actually a
He was
really,
actually
really
a
good
very good,
fundraiser.
yeah.
Yes, he was
And
very
he's
good.
gone, and they picked a
Yeah.
backbencher that's never raised a dime because he lives in a very red district, so he never has
Right.
to even fundraise for himself, and they're
Right.
not really raising any money as far as I can tell
Right. So
anymore.
but the campaign committees couldn't really make up shortfall very well of their candidates, and especially in the Senate, because Rick Scott did such a terrible job of managing the Senate campaign arm. So anyway, what happened is because the candidates themselves were not doing well fundraising, and then also the campaign committees were actually didn't have as much money as they normally did, particularly in the Senate, they couldn't make up for the shortfall of those candidates. Now, what's happening here is that traditionally the the campaign committees of the Republican Party, the National Committee, the Republican National Committee, the RNC, and the campaign committees have done quite well because they've taken in a ton of money from people who, from well-heeled donors, right? But right now, that money, their fundraising is flagging. And it's probably partly because the MAGA brand is so bad, right? Most people don't want actually to be part of it. So
the Republicans with money are not the MAGA base.
Right. There's a few oligarchs, right? There's a few oligarchs who are funding the Republican Party. And like, that's it. And then the MAGA base is giving all of its money, not to the campaign committees, because they could give a crap about them. They're giving it all to Donald Trump. And so Donald Trump has basically bankrupted anyone in the Republican Party who isn't him. That's it. And this is a situation.
And he's now hawking sneakers.
Right. He's
not raising money for Republican candidates down the ballot.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So
sneakers.
They're in a lot of trouble. The Republican Party is in a lot of trouble financially in general. And then on top of that, what we've seen from the Biden campaign is that they're actually running a real campaign. They have a real strategy. It's, I always wish that everything had started sooner than it did, like 4 years ago. Because I'm always like, we got to get on it. But no, they are raising real money. They've already bought $250 million in campaign ads, booked from after the convention to the election.
And just for context, that's a shit ton.
It's a shit ton of money. And it's basically all going, of course, to the battleground states, right? But this is an organized campaign. You don't raise that kind of money, and you don't have that kind of money to spend if you don't have the infrastructure in place that Marcos just talked about, right? You have to have the campaign infrastructure to raise that kind of money. So they also, from what I understand, and I'm not really read in on this at all, but, there's going to be a coordinated campaign, I think, around some of the younger people in the party, like AOC and others, to talk about Biden and his what he's done as a president in powerful ways. And so, carrying the sort of working as surrogates to a younger generation of folks to say, hey, give him a second look on what he's done for the country. And she did this successfully in Senator Ed Markey's campaign. I don't know if you remember it, but he was facing a challenge, and she came out and said, there was an ad, I think, where she said something along the lines of, I'm not so concerned about the age of the candidate as I am about the age of their ideas. Something along those lines. Okay.
Yeah. So, Ed Markey was in Massachusetts. It's a place where AOC might not. Maybe Sherrod Brown might not get that bump in Ohio. I don't know.
No. I agree.
The idea being, Democrats have a very deep bench. They have incredible talent that speaks to different parts of the base. And so the issue isn't so much, Joe Biden is old and out of touch, and he's an old white guy in a country that increasingly is diverse and a party that is very young. He's got an army of surrogates that will serve him well. Compare that to the Republicans, where the surrogates are Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene. And he has pushed out the sort of establishment. Republicans are literally quitting in droves. They are quitting because they don't want anything to do with that party. And with that goes money, credibility, and sane voices that sort of speak to voters. They're really doubling down on MAGA crazy and making themselves increasingly insular. And we talk about this almost every week. There's one sort of swing demographic in the country, and that's college-educated suburban white women. and maybe white men too, to a much smaller extent, but I think they're starting to shift. And they are shifting because they are uncomfortable with this QAnon adjacent MAGA Republican Party and Donald Trump's just meanness and
and
pettiness.
abortion. I mean,
I
that is,
mean,
yeah. No, but I'm
how can I forget
serious. Like
democracy?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, democracy and abortion. I mean, reproductive freedom is such a huge issue among that group of women, So I think that that we just can't underestimate. I mean, we saw last week in the special elections that was incredibly important. And Tom Suozzi in his campaign to reclaim his seat in New York
that was,
03,
yeah, that
Long
was the
Island, Queens hybrid seat, right?
yeah, that
Yeah.
was the what's his face's district. See, I
Oh,
I
George
forgot.
Santos. Right,
It
exactly.
was the Santos
George
district. That's what
Santos.
people
That's
remember.
it.
And here
You're
I am.
too old. You're too
I'm
old.
too old.
Time for retirement. Marcos, time for retirement. So yeah, for George Santos, right? It was a special election for disgraced Republican Congressman George Santos, and Tom Suozzi won that, and he won it partly. He did something interesting that I think is worth noting. He kind of went. He maybe demagogued more than I would love on immigration, but he did talk specifically, even as he said that there should be an immediate border shutdown, right? But he at the same time was talking about we should also have a pathway to citizenship. We need to deal with this issue, and I will work across the aisle to deal with it. And he emphasized a very results-oriented, bipartisan, willingness to work on the issue of immigration, and at the same time emphasized reproductive freedoms and the fact that Republicans are going to take it away from if they get the chance, if they have the power, they will pass a national abortion ban.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
is so yeah. So
Carrie,
he did both.
We're running out of time, and sir, I just want to bring it back because the fundamentally that's going to be their arguments. Joe Biden is too old, which is what we started with, and it's not an argument that sort of lands. And to the point where Joe Biden, nobody's going to pretend he like revs up the bass and gets everybody excited. This may be the first election, I think, in my since I've been paying attention to politics, that we may see reverse coattails, where actually that bottom of the ticket is so dynamic and gets people so excited at the House and Senate level that they actually help Joe Biden win, because the excitement isn't at the top of the ticket, it's actually at the bottom of the ticket. And everybody understands the importance of Joe Biden. And it's not so much let's get Joe Biden elected, it's let's keep Donald Trump the hell away from the White House, and let's empower this Democratic majority that can actually get things accomplished that matter to people, not these senseless investigations and just theatrics that the Republicans have done in the House, because they clearly can't govern. And I saw somebody say that it's actually Nancy Pelosi's fault because she made it look so easy to run a House with a small majority.
I retweeted that. You know who that was? I think it was Christine Reynolds at
It was.
it was so good.
Hilarious.
It was so good.
So it again, Joe Biden is old. Like, I think now 30 minutes into the show, like, I think the shock has worn off a little bit.
Yeah, I'm starting to deal with it. I don't know. At the beginning of the show, I was like, you know what I think we should have is a floor fight at the national convention over and like 15 rounds of votes before we figure out who our nominee is, and then everybody hates each other and we turn off. I mean, for a second I was like, that's really the answer, but now I'm starting to rethink that. Maybe not.
And you know what? Joe Biden wins. We save democracy, and let the 2028 primary begin the next day. I would be perfectly happy with having that debate after. So yeah. I think that's where we are right now. Next week, we're going to be talking about that Republican message, and it's sort of notion of vibes as driving a lot of the political discourse. And Republicans don't actually have facts or figures. I mean, we saw this even with Donald Trump trying to take credit for the record high stock market by claiming that people had vibes that he was going to win election, and that's why the numbers are up. Like, they really don't know how to deal with the fact that Joe Biden is having a historically successful presidency. So his age isn't going to change that. And I think you're absolutely right that there is value in age and wisdom that we as a society have lost track of, sort of because we become, the elderly are not as valued anymore. Wisdom isn't as valued in our culture. Nobody's calling their mom to find out how to deal with a kid. They can Google it, or they can ask on Reddit, or they can, look on social media. And so
I
it's a different.
yeah. Can I just say, I legit didn't think that Biden was going to be able to get as much legislation through as he did with
No,
the
no, no. He shocked us.
incredibly
Yeah.
razor thin margins that he had. And the only reason he was able to do it is because he'd spent, 3 decades in the Senate.
Mm.
That was the only reason he was able to do that, is because he understood how Congress works as a beast, right?
We
So he was
understood
like,
Joe Manchin, how to deal with the
yeah,
Joe Manchins of the
yeah,
Senate, right? So,
yeah.
uh, absolutely. And we may not like it. We may be pining for more dynamic youth and new leadership, more modern leadership, and we're going to get that. We are going to get that. First, we need to get rid of the MAGA threat to our democracy, to our civil liberties, to our rights. And I think if Trump loses his time, I think that's it. I think Trump is done. And we need him done. And I don't think the MAGA movement survives without him. I don't think Matt Gaetz or MTG can support that. Ron DeSantis is going to carry the mantle. Donald Trump is a historically unique figure. And thank God there aren't more of him on the horizon in the Republican Party that I can see. Hopefully, I'm not being blinded to something, but I just don't see it. And so we need to defeat that threat. And so I really, really hope that this quote debate about Joe Biden's age plays its course, and let Republicans have their probing investigations into Joe Biden's birth certificate to find out how old he actually is. But I don't think voters care. I think they're focused on bigger issues, and quite frankly, the bigger issue is Trump. They're focused on Trump. Let's just be real. He's the
And
towering
you know what?
presence.
All the polling that I see about congressional Republicans, no one other than like a third of the country thinks that they're doing anything that they would hope, that they're not focused on any of the issues that they want them to be focused on. And so this isn't going to,
And even that third
impeachment
doesn't actually
and
believe it. They're going to say
yeah,
that just out of partisan loyalty. They're not.
yeah,
They
yeah.
don't actually.
They're just not addressing. So the
Yeah,
House Republicans are in. What are they down to? Like a 1-seat majority right now? And I think by the time it's something
like three.
close to that.
It's three. Yeah, it might be three.
By
But
the
yeah,
by the time I think a few more seats are filled, they'll probably end up with they'll be running with like a 3 to 4 seat majority. They're going to be in a lot of trouble. The
they
House
are absolutely.
Republicans, I feel much better about the House than I do about the Senate. I feel very good about the House. And I feel not
Carrie, that's a
terrible.
show for another.
Yeah, I know. I have more to
Don't
say.
get me
Anyway,
started on another
no,
tangent, because
yes,
we can
no,
talk.
it's
We'll
true.
fill another
It's
show
true.
on
It's
the
true.
House. So
It's true.
that is our show for today. Thank you so much, Carrie. Love, 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 love having you and talking about these issues, including the shocking revelation. I hope you can sleep tonight now knowing that Joe Biden is old. Thanks to Walter for producing the show. Thanks for everybody who helps behind the scenes, Perry and Paul. And thank you, the viewer, listener, reader, for being part of the movement to save our democracy against the real danger of the MAGA movement. We gotta defeat it. And I cannot be happier that you're all fellow travelers in this battle. So thank you so much. Look forward to this battle ahead with you guys. Catch you all next week. Bye-bye.